West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Mark, the RNC has effectively just declared war on students, on young people, in one of the closest swing states in the entire country, one that may very well decide the election in November. What just happened here?
Okay, this is at some level nuts. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. The Republican National Committee has sued the State Board of Elections in North Carolina because they have allowed the state flagship university, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is a state-run university. It is their flagship university, has approved that school's electronic IDs to be used for voting. Now, the reason why I say this is nuts is because North Carolina already has some of the strictest voter ID laws in the country. Okay, North Carolina already requires very, very strict voter ID as a result of Republican legislation. To tell you how strict they have made this ID requirement, neighboring Duke University, a private university, had to create a second form of ID. Not their normal student ID, a second form of ID in order for their students to use. But the University of North Carolina, because they're a state flagship university, said, you know what, we're going to have our digital IDs, our electronic IDs, be the ID that we give students and faculty, and they should be able to use them to vote. And the state board said yes, and now the Republican Party is challenging that, saying that they shouldn't be able to use those digital IDs.
Mark, what was the rationale for the RNC to actually wage this lawsuit against the university?
Okay, get this. They argued two things. Number one, they say that they are afraid that people will fake their electronic student IDs. I mean, let's just pause for a moment and say, oh my God, there has never been a student who's faked an ID when there were not digital IDs. But set that aside. They believe that people will fake the digital IDs by taking photocopies of an ID, photoshopping them, taking a picture, and then putting them on their phones. I think that the people who filed this lawsuit they're not like really current with technology, because I think they think digital IDs are just like a photograph on a phone.
Yeah.
Like not that it's like a digitally, stamped and native product.
Let's see one of those kids try to do a fake digital ID and go through TSA and see if that works.
Right, with a photo, right?
And also these are students. Imagine going through all of this trouble to fake an ID to go vote. We should be so lucky that they're that desperate to go vote.
Right.
You know?
The second thing is they say that foreign students will infiltrate this ID system and will use it to vote. Now, here are the problems with that, okay? Set aside the technological problems. This is to vote. It's not to register to vote. You already had to show ID to register to vote, right? Yeah. So all of these people who they are imagining are faking IDs or are foreign, they are already on the voter rolls because they've already shown a proof. They've already shown an ID to register to vote.
Right.
This is just to actually show up at the polls and have the poll worker say, yeah, that's you. That's the same person as I see in the photo. So none of this makes any sense. I mean, none of this makes any sense. And so it is clearly just a pretext that the Republicans have in order to make it harder for students to be able to vote at the University of North Carolina.
Right, knowing full well that they're more likely to vote for Democrats than Republicans. Mark, what is the remedy if a student ID was a valid form of ID, but then through no fault of their own, the school changed to digital IDs? Like, you can't just disenfranchise thousands of students, can you?
I mean, no, you can't, and that's the reason why they're going to lose this lawsuit. You know, the Democratic Party has intervened to defend this case. My law firm and we've intervened on behalf of a student group at UNC to defend this case, and so no, I don't think this lawsuit's going to prevail. I think Brian, the way to think about this lawsuit in all seriousness is, you know, we didn't see the Republican Party filing a lot of litigation in North Carolina until after Kamala Harris became the nominee. And since Kamala Harris became the nominee, there has been kind of a helter-skelter, seems very panicky kind of approach Republicans are taking to litigation in North Carolina. And so, you know, I wonder if the two are not connected. That essentially, you know, Kamala Harris became the nominee, her poll numbers were vastly better in North Carolina than Joe Biden's were. And of course, if Donald Trump doesn't win North Carolina, he's done for, right? This is like a must-win state. And right. So they are just at this point back on their heels. And just like Donald Trump's messaging against Kamala Harris seems to be kind of here, there, and everywhere, and not really have a reason or rhyme, I kind of wonder if this lawsuit and some of the others we see in North Carolina is just born out of desperation.
Well, I think we're not giving Trump enough credit for his brilliant messaging about how migrants are eating pet dogs and cats and how Kamala Harris isn't black. I want to give him a little bit of credit here for what he's for his well thought out attacks against Kamala Harris.
I do have to give J.D. Vance credit, you know, because it is rare that a home state senator decides to demonize and then cause the shutdown and evacuation of things
of his own state. Constituents. Yeah, really brilliant stuff.
But he did say, as I recall, not to digress too far, but didn't he say that he was making up stories?
He admitted that he had created the story, but sometimes you just gotta lie to get what you want, you know? Yeah. And that's usually something you don't say on national television.
When you're trying to run a winning campaign, these are all things are not typical.
That's right. You did mention that your firm had intervened on behalf of the students in North Carolina. Obviously, hugely important for your team to do that. I think for those of us watching, a small way that we can show our appreciation for the work that Mark and his team are doing right now in North Carolina and across the country is to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, how do you reconcile the fact that student IDs from a state school in North Carolina are indeed valid forms of ID with the concern that electronic IDs may pose other problems?
Right, and that's why this is so stupidly pretextual. I mean, let's be honest. You know, students have physical IDs, and they use them to purchase things on campus. They use them, to get into buildings, to card swipe to get into buildings, and the same is true of their electronic IDs. And the electronic IDs are no more or less secure than the physical IDs. You know, the interesting thing here is, like I said, the only university in the entire state of North Carolina that has gone through the trouble of creating a digital ID that they could then submit to the state and have it count for voting was the flagship university. You know, if this was Duke University, I'd understand, okay, they don't like Duke students. Duke students are mostly from out of state. It's a private university. But this is a real slap in the face to their home state. The fact that the Republicans are attacking the University of North Carolina for their student ID and their student body really just shows how desperate they are. Because as you point out, this doesn't make any sense between the physical IDs and the digital IDs.
To what extent do you think that Republicans' embrace of someone like Mark Robinson, who is running for governor, has led to the polling deficit that we're seeing right now for Republicans?
Oh, I mean, there's no question. I mean, Mark Robinson is a historically terrible candidate. I mean, it is possible that even in a state that, we oftentimes talk about being kind of like a 50-50 state, when we talk about Republican gerrymandering, we're like, look at the control of the legislature and what's a 50-50 state. It's entirely possible that at the end of this election, you're going to have Josh Stein win by near double digits, and you could have Kamala Harris win by a couple of points. And a lot of this is the hangover from that governor's race, because Mark Robinson has said some absolutely incredibly terrible things. I mean, there are times when I listen to J.D. Vance and I think, you know what, if they were going to replace J.D. Vance, they wouldn't replace him with RFK, they'd replace him with Mark Robinson. He'd fit right in. Or at least, you know, he is probably more of an heir to Trumpism than anyone else. And so, yeah, I think it's dragging down the entire ticket.
You know, you claiming that Mark Robinson is a historically bad candidate is a real slap in the face to Kari Lake out there.
Look, I mean, let's be honest. I think there's a really good argument that Mark Robinson's going to lose by a much wider margin than Kari Lake lost or will lose. I mean, Ruben Gallego's going to win that Senate race in Arizona, but you know, would it surprise you if Mark Robinson lost by 10 points or 12 points?
No,
it wouldn't surprise me.
No,
I mean, he's just like so outside the mainstream of anything.
And by the way, this is to Republicans' own detriment, because they've already seen what happens when they get these wildly far-right lunatic candidates like they did with Don Bolduc, Doug Mastriano, Kari Lake, Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker. Those people underperformed even the other Republicans on the ballots across the country, and yet they've learned no lesson, which is a pattern that we're seeing right now, is not learning these lessons. This whole election denialism that's taken over the Republican Party, where they refuse to acknowledge objective reality, has robbed them of the ability to see their mistakes and learn from them moving forward. And that's why we have Donald Trump again engaging in the same practices, again falling behind in the polling, and these other candidates, these other Trumpist candidates who are doing the exact same thing as Donald Trump did, and none of them learn the lesson because they rob themselves of the ability to do that by engaging in election denialism every time they lose.
Right, and far be it from me to defend the likes of Herschel Walker or Dr. Oz or Kari Lake or any of the others, but you know, the Republicans there could at least say, well, we didn't know how terrible they were.
Right.
You know, right? I mean, like Mark Robinson, I mean, you've been talking about Mark. I mean, Mark Robinson didn't sneak up on the Republican Party in North Carolina. His incendiary and outlandish claims were well known before they chose him as their nominee.
Let's finish off with this real quick. When will we have some type of resolution on what's happening in North Carolina?
So look, I think, you know, every day that goes by, we are one day closer to the election, and we are at the point where people are going to start to vote early soon. So I expect the courts will handle this case very quickly. I would not be surprised if we had a ruling by the end of this month.
It is Friday, the 20th of September of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and we will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, indeed. Well, here we are on Friday, and perfect time for a series of weird sex scandals. Boy, I don't even know if I want to talk about it. I feel like I need a shower before I take my shower. Or I might need a shower after I've taken my shower if I got into this. So it's good. It's good that I haven't actually showered yet, because I'm definitely going to need it. Just even mentioning these things. Ick. You know how when you were younger, I don't know about you, but one of the ickiest things was like imagining your parents having sex. Ew, ick. So I get the same sort of feeling to this day, envisioning these weirdos in their freak-offs. Jeez. Oh boy. I did take part. Well, I wouldn't say take part, but I was in the house when my parents had a Tupperware orgy. And those burping lids, jeez. So yeah, I looked at that and said, you know what? I'm never growing up to be that. Never. I know the middle-class lifestyle of suburbia back in the day was pretty freaky, but apparently nothing compares to today. Yikes. So we never had Amway parties because, well, my parents knew they were fascists right from the very beginning. But Tupperware, I don't know why. We had the Tupperware orgies with the burping lids. No kid should ever have to, well, they shouldn't succumb to that. They shouldn't be made to succumb to that. If there's any complaint I might have about my upbringing, that might be it. Because I'll tell you, I may have the cornflower Corningware collection, but I always hide the Tupperware. Tupperware is no more, apparently. I think they don't exist anymore as a company. Are they still manufacturing, Tupperware products with the burping lids? Because I got a bunch. Fortunately, I think I'm stocked up. Okay, well, I'd much rather have Tupperware orgies with the burping lids than whatever it is RFK Jr. and Olivia Nuzzi were doing. Oh, yuck. I did mention that does seem like it would be a juicy whale of a story. And now I need a shower. Okay? I do. But I'll muddle through until we're done with the show because we don't want to delay it any more than we've been delaying it all these months. Yep. When Mom passed, I will admit that, I had a very the show must go on attitude, and I have my whole life. And I started allowing a little bit of this feeling of, we'll get the show on, don't worry about it. Instead of this frantic, the show must go on under any circumstance, any. Before we moved the mothership from the Bay Area to here in Southern Oregon, I ran the radio station and did an earlier version, the proto version of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with a partner that will be left unnamed. And the day I had shoulder surgery, when they released me, I did a show. So, surgeries never stopped me. Well, I will say when my adult son passed, a little bit of that started sneaking in. But I also used the responsibilities to the station and the show must go on responsibility to the show as a form of therapy, which some people would call avoidance, because I was avoiding the grief of my son to doing this show. But what it did is that it was work. It was putting one foot in front of the other. It got me through the day so that then when I was left to my own devices, I would just cry. But while I was in this myopic focus of what is now in front of me is what is important, it got me through that. But with Mom, because it was ultimately expected, I didn't want her to die, especially just, we were going to go to lunch in Cave Junction, So, and she had the little fall and I guess you would call it an aneurysm. I suppose that's what happened. She had carotid surgery just weeks before, and that was an issue. She was on Plavix. But anyway, my lizard brain attitude of the show must go on really waned tremendously. And then with Dad passing just a couple of months later, which was also expected, he was in his mid-90s. And his decline happened really quickly in terms of awareness and whatnot. So good, but still, some might say a little shocking because you're expecting, we're going to have lunch and, like Big Bear or whatever. And then some people may count this as not even comparable to the death of parents, and of course it isn't. And the death of a child, adult or otherwise, of course it isn't. But then on the other hand, everything and everyone that you love has value. So when little Precious passed here 2 weeks ago, a little more now, a couple of days, over 2 weeks, yeah, it's like, we'll get it done. And I apologize because I owe it to you folks out there who've stuck with us here at Netroots Radio for so long, all these, well, over a decade and a half, about a decade and a half. And then also here, specifically with West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, I do feel a fiduciary responsibility of sorts to, the show must go on, and hopefully the quality hasn't waned too much, if there was any to begin with. But, yeah, I never thought that I would reach a point where it would be like, we'll do it. Rather than, God damn it, we gotta do now. Yeah, perfect. Gotta do it. Hit your spots. Or maybe it's just that, well, there's only so many days left. All right? Why waste them? Okay. And that means why waste them on frantic emotionalism that's not making anything better? If it was making it better, then that would be one thing. But I think that we can still do a show without feeling that the world will end if for some reason we falter a bit. Okay. I don't mean to be confessional. I'm, especially here. I don't mean to be. I guess maybe I do. But I don't mean to be so confessional. And, but thank you for listening. It is much appreciated. Alrighty, why don't we just get off of all of that? And we could speak about any number of things, but we did put a curated show together for you, and we have, well, given it short shrift for a bit of time, pontificating. So why don't we go ahead and give you a rundown on what we do have in store for you so we can give it a little bit of attention as we head into this weekend. Oh, yeah. Summer ends this weekend. Well, that was great news up there with Democracy Docket and doing the good work, making sure that people can vote, because what an odious little strategy. They put in an ID law and then they go, oh, well, you can't have a digital ID. All right. It's just really a fraction away from the trope of the gumball counting jar. Count how many gumballs are in the jar, and then you can vote. Okay. And if you can't, then you don't get to vote. Oh, we're sorry, you guessed wrong. Sit down. On the rest of the menu, hey, this is great news, because I want more storage. In a move to counter China dominance in the market, the Biden-Harris administration awarded $3 billion for EV battery production in 14 states. Okay. And some people might say that tariffs might be involved in this a little bit, but this is a little bit different than what Donnie was proposing. 4 men among the first rioters to assault police officers and the first to breach a security perimeter during the attack on the U.S. Capitol were sentenced to prison terms. It's about time. And the animals of the Big Bear Alpine Zoo are returning home after spending a week in Palm Springs, evacuated from the wildfires. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where 8 former state security personnel accused of responsibility for the deaths of 78 Muslim protesters who were arrested in southern Thailand in 2004 will be indicted on murder charges. You mean they haven't already? And an oversight board says it will help speed up projects to fix Puerto Rico's electric grid, which has been broken for, well, just about 10 to 15 years. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Do follow me on social media at Justice Putnam. You'll have access to the show notes and links diaries posted 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Co's, and that way you can have access to the actual reportage by the actual reporters. So do follow me on social media at Justice Putnam. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is by Matthew Daly out of the Associated Press. The Biden-Harris administration is awarding over $3 billion to U.S. companies to boost domestic production of advanced batteries and other materials that are used for electric vehicles, part of a continuing push to reduce China's global dominance in battery production for EVs and other electronics. The grants will fund a total of 25 projects in 14 states, including battleground states such as Michigan and North Carolina, as well as Ohio, Texas, South Carolina, and Louisiana. The grants that were announced today, I'll get it out. Excuse me. Well, they mark the second round of EV battery funding under the bipartisan infrastructure law approved in 2021. Remember when Trump said it was infrastructure week every week and nothing ever was spent or done? Not even his stupid wall. An earlier round allocated $1.8 billion for 14 projects that are ongoing. The totals are down from amounts officials announced in October of 2022 and reflect a number of projects that were withdrawn or rejected by U.S. officials during sometimes lengthy negotiations. The money is part of a larger effort by the Biden and Harris administration to boost production and sales of electric vehicles as a key element of their strategy to slow climate change and build up U.S. manufacturing. Companies receiving awards process lithium, graphite, or other battery materials or manufacture components used in EV batteries. The administration is committed to making batteries, in a statement they said, in the United States that are going to be vital for powering our grid, our homes and businesses, and America's iconic auto industry. The awards announced bring to nearly $35 billion total in U.S. investments to bolster domestic critical minerals and battery supply chains. And the administration cited projects from major lithium mines in Nevada and North Carolina to battery factories in Michigan and Ohio to production of rare earth elements and magnets in California and Texas. Michael Kunzelman and Alana Durkin-Richer of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 4 men who are among the first rioters to assault police officers and the first to breach a security perimeter during the attack on the U.S. Capitol were sentenced yesterday, Thursday, to prison terms ranging from 1 year of internment confinement over weekends to 8 years behind bars. Well, at least something was handed down that was at least worth it. Before handing down the punishments, U.S. District Judge Jacob decried misinformation being spread in the public about the riot and efforts to downplay the violence that left more than 100 police officers injured. Cobb said the temperature remains too high, citing threats against public officials and the apparent assassination attempts targeting Trump. The judge said it scares her to think what could happen after the next election. Let us remind ourselves, those 2 apparent suicides were by guys who are registered Republicans. Let's just be clear. Not in my lifetime have I seen a situation where the peaceful transfer of power was threatened like it was on January 6th, she said. Stephen Randolph, a certified nursing assistant, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. James Grant, who was accepted to the University of Alabama's law school before his arrest, was sentenced to 3 years. Jason Blythe, a delivery driver, was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months. Paul Johnson, who owns a tree removal business, was sentenced to 1 year of internment confinement over the weekends, followed by 2 years of home confinement. Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. With a major wildfire burning near his mountain town east of Los Angeles, Cowboy the Barn Owl was unaware of the danger and instead having the adventure of a lifetime. Perched in the front seat of a truck, Cowboy, along with nearly 50 other animals, were being evacuated on September 12th from the Big Bear Alpine Zoo in the face of the advancing line fire, which blazed through more than 60 square miles of the San Bernardino National Forest. He had the greatest time, said Mike Barnes, Director of Animal Care and Health at the Living Desert Zoo and Garden in Palm Springs, where Cowboy was being taken. They said he was probably going to be a handful on the ride down, and he was the biggest sweetheart. In less than 48 hours, 2/3 of the zoo's animals had been safely evacuated. About a week later, on Thursday yesterday, Cowboy and the other animals returned home. They had this little kind of holiday, if you will, down here in the desert, said Heather Downs, animal curator at the Living Desert. It was the second time that Big Bear Alpine Zoo animals were transported to the Living Desert during a wildfire. Each time, lessons were learned. The line fire spewed out billowing clouds of smoke, turning the skies orange and filling the air with hazardous particles. For birds and smaller animals who have higher respiratory rates and are especially sensitive to air quality, they needed to get out of there fast. The residents of the Big Bear Alpine Zoo are not your usual zoo inhabitants. The sanctuary houses rehabilitated animals that are unable to be released into the wild, many of which are elderly or have injuries. One of the eagles is blind in one eye after suffering from DDT poisoning, which means staff had to add perches and stumps lowered to the ground in its enclosure and move logs that could be tripping hazards. The sanctuary houses many other birds who cannot fly, as well as a three-legged kit fox who also needed special accommodations. Left behind in Big Bear were the bears, bobcats, mountain lions, snow leopards, and wolves who were moved inside where they were protected by HVAC systems and air scrubbers. The animals that were transported could not go on a full stomach, but zoo staff made sure everyone was fed that night when they arrived at the living desert. Well, that's a heartening story. And it brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, the difference between want and need. Beetlejuice, directed by Tim Burton and written by Alfred Gough, Miles Miller, and Seth Grahame-Smith, is the sequel to Burton's 1988 breakout feature Beetlejuice. It has so many good things. Sadly, its story is not one of them. In Beetlejuice, written by Michael McDowell, Larry Wilson, and Warren Scarron, the Maitlands were a darling, nice, small-town couple who died and stayed in their beloved dream house as ghosts. When a family from the city moves in, does a total remodel, and starts living their wacky-tacky, garish lives, the Maitlands are beside themselves. They need them out, and that means taking a risk they shouldn't. It's a great hook. The ghosts are being haunted by the living. It's the reverse of what you expect. It's clever. Plus, the family's funny, smart goth daughter Lydia needs to be seen, and the Maitlands need to have a successful domestic life, or afterlife, and you root for the three of them getting together. On the other hand, the story and characters for Beetlejuice feel very been there. Back in the city, Lydia is now a television ghost chaser, and she's got this teenage daughter, Astrid, who's embarrassed by her mom, believes her mom's a fraud, says she's been neglected, although all Lydia does is worry about Astrid and reach out to her. And Lydia's dad has died, so she, Astrid, and Lydia's mom have to go back to the house, and blah, 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 blah. And these people want and lack, and they're fraught and broken, but no one needs anything. So they have no strong motivation to take compelling action. They just scheme and react, so there's less of a good reason to root for them. And in Beetlejuice was this erupting force of chaos, always threatening to go too far and tip everything over, a great setup for Michael Keaton's great performance. In Beetlejuice, it's like, oh yeah, and here's Beetlejuice. You remember him, right? I mean, it's a good cast, it's got some funny jokes, it looks good, and it's what a lot of people seem to want, so maybe I just have different needs. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Today, we have Emerging Infectious Diseases Managing Editor Byron Breedlove with us again. Welcome as always, Byron.
Thanks, Sarah.
I understand that the cover for the December issue of EID is a special one for the EID Journal. Would you tell us about that?
For the second time since I've been with the EID Journal, we had a chance to discuss and, in a sense, collaborate on creating the cover art. The first time was the painting of the Alamo that appears on the August 2014 cover. This month's cover, a timeless symbiosis, evolved from meeting the artist, Bindu Viswanathan, in the spring of 2017. Bindu is actually a biostatistician as well as an artist, and it was her friend and a fellow CDC employee, Anupama Shankar, who introduced us. Bindu and I talked about the journal covers and some ideas and approaches. Peter Drotman, EID's editor-in-chief, and I agreed that art relating to zoonoses, that is, diseases that can be transmitted to humans from animals, as well as from humans to animals, would be a great fit. During the early stages of the creative phase, Bindu shared her ideas and sketches, and she was very graceful about some initial feedback that changed her direction. And she created this colorful, detailed painting that meshes so well with the issue's theme of zoonotic infections.
How about reading your essay for us now then, Byron?
Sure. Everything within a circle is one thing, which is encircled and framed, wrote 20th century American mythologist and lecturer Joseph Campbell. This month's cover art, A Timeless Symbiosis, uses the motif of circles to connect animals and humans. Bindu Viswanathan, the artist who created the painting, is also a lecturer and biostatistician at the University of Texas, Austin. Many of her paintings inspire viewers to think about the fuller connection between animals and humans. According to Viswanathan, circles have no beginning and no end, much like the interdependence of humans and animals. They also represent the womb, the origin of life, and its continuum. Viswanathan incorporates elements from the Indian tribal art of the Warli, an indigenous people who live in the hills of western India, into a timeless symbiosis. For example, Warli art, which has been practiced since at least the 10th century, often depicts the intertwined links of humans with both domestic and wild animals. Viswanathan's meticulous interplay of geometric forms, vibrant colors, calculated symmetry, and traditional symbols is arrayed within the concentric circles and draws the viewer deeper and deeper into the painting. The outer circular border comprises 122 Warli-style figures, linked hand in hand, keeping vigil. Within the next circle, against a dark blue background, ornamentally decorated pairs of pigs, cows, chickens, and rats, all animals associated with domestication, are interspersed among figures of humans, posed as though engaged in traditional agrarian task. The disproportionate size of the animals underscores their importance to and impact on the people. More human figures are juxtaposed with bats and birds, wild animals many humans are likely to encounter, and major sources of diverse zoonotic viruses throughout the world. The radiating central image contains what is perhaps best described as a viewer's choice, possibly a sun or essential life force, or maybe a virus or other microscopic organism. Throughout each of the circles, the artist incorporates various geometric forms, stair-stepped pyramids, triangles, and circles, and then reuses those forms to create ornate, complex designs. Viswanathan notes that I gravitate towards geometric designs and symmetry in my abstract art, which stems from the same source that is inspired by mathematics. As a biostatistician, I model complex relationships that exist in the natural world. Once a viewer is drawn to the center of the painting, the tendency is to move back through the circles to the edges of the fiery orange border and then re-examine the careful symmetry, much like the process of viewing a mandala. The artist portrays her theme of symbiosis on multiple levels and illustrates the complex relationships and connections between humans and animals. Rudolf Virchow, one of the 19th century's principal leaders in medicine and pathology, stated that, "Between animal and human medicine, there is no dividing line, nor should there be." Virchow stressed that diseases of humans and animals are interconnected and devised the term zoonosis to describe the links between infectious diseases and animals and human health. The ring of people forming the outer edge of a timeless symbiosis can serve to symbolize the modern One Health concept, an initiative that requires close collaboration among researchers in the animal, human, and environmental health sectors to protect and preserve life.
Thank you, Byron. Listeners can read Byron's cover essay, Everything Within a Circle is One Thing, at cdc.gov/EID. I'm Sarah Gregory for Emerging Infectious Diseases.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government buy-in for the people. Shortly after taking office, Alabama Secretary of State Wes Allen directed state election officials to invalidate voter registrations of immigrants who had been issued a permanent resident or green card by the U.S. government. In his zeal to root out non-citizens, he apparently invalidated eligible U.S. naturalized citizens as well. Despite no evidence of widespread illegal voting by non-citizens in Alabama, Allen directed the removal of residents who had a federal non-citizen identification number from the state's voter rolls. The state purged 3,251 people in August, after which Allen said in a statement, "I have been clear that I will not tolerate the participation of non-citizens in our elections." The Alabama Reflector reports that a lawsuit was filed September 13th by democracy groups and 4 naturalized citizens who had one time held a green card and a non-citizen identification number and were swept up in Allen's, quote, purge program. The complaint alleges that it violates the First and 14th Amendments, the Voting Rights Act, and the National Voter Registration Act, and asks the court to strike the program down. It also alleges that the announcement and notification of voters violated the VRA's prohibition of, quote, attempting to intimidate, threaten, or coerce any person for voting or attempting to vote. No hearing has yet been scheduled. We've linked the complaint at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1878. That was the day that socialist author Upton Sinclair was born in Baltimore, Maryland. A prolific writer, Sinclair wrote nearly 100 books and other publications. Upton Sinclair's father and father's relatives had been wealthy Southerners, but thanks to the Civil War and its aftermath, the family was left in financial ruins. His mother was from a wealthy Episcopalian family and was very strict. Sinclair often stayed with her wealthy parents. These family experiences growing up gave Sinclair an insight into how both the rich and poor lived. Sinclair studied at the City College of New York and for a time at Columbia University. He went on to write several popular novels that explored the experiences of working people in the rapidly industrializing United States. The Flyver King explored the impact of Henry Ford on auto production. Oil focused on the oil industry in Southern California. But Sinclair is best remembered for his classic expose of the Chicago meatpacking industry, The Jungle. The book was fiction, but based in fact. In 1904, he spent 7 weeks working undercover in Chicago's meatpacking plants to get material for the book. The Jungle was published in 1906 and was immediately a bestseller. It was originally published in serial form in a socialist newspaper. Sinclair said that he wrote the novel intending to set forth the breaking of human hearts by a system which exploits the labor of men and women for profit. The novel led to congressional legislation and federal regulation of the meatpacking industry. It helped lead to the passage of the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be a tad cooler than yesterday, upper 70s, low 80s, which to me seems just about what we had yesterday. Winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, with plentiful sunshine throughout the day. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid to upper 40s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then sunny skies tomorrow, Saturday, with highs in the mid-80s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and sunny skies, I mentioned, will be on Saturday and also on Sunday. It's supposed to be the first day of fall. Similar temperatures too. Ragweed pollen is rated high in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 15 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in our fall moderate range at level 5, but I would still take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.07 inches, visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 73 degrees and fair with a moderate thunderstorm advisory. Paris is 75 degrees and fair, also with a moderate thunderstorm advisory. Rome is 77 and fair. Kabul is 73 and clear. Tokyo is 89 and mostly cloudy. I'm sorry, that was Hong Kong, is 89 and mostly cloudy, because Tokyo is 83 and partly cloudy. Auckland in New Zealand is 53 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 77 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, with a coastal flood watch. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Chitimus Saksunchai of the Associated Press World Desk brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. 8 former state security personnel accused of responsibility for the deaths of 78 Muslim protesters who were arrested in southern Thailand in 2004 will be indicted on murder charges, the prosecutor's office announced on Wednesday. The case earned special notoriety because of the manner in which the victims died. They were arrested, had their hands tied, and were loaded onto trucks, stacked like firewood. By the time the vehicles reached an army base where they were taken to be detained, 78 had died of crushing or suffocation. The long-delayed action in connection with what is known as the Takbai massacre came just over a month before the statute of limitations expires on the case. Even though the suspects have been indicted, the charges can still expire if none of those named appears in court before an October 25th deadline. The deaths occurred shortly after a Muslim separatist insurgency erupted in Thailand's southernmost provinces, the only ones with Muslim majorities in the Buddhist-dominated nation. Muslim residents have long complained they are treated like second-class citizens in Thailand, and separatist movements have been periodically active for decades. Heavy-handed crackdowns have fueled the discontent. Fighting continues to this day, but at a lower level. Cotto of the Associated Press World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal control board that oversees Puerto Rico's finances announced that it will step in to help speed up projects to fix the island's crumbling power grid as widespread outages persist, for about a decade. Only $1.2 billion out of more than $17 billion authorized by the U.S. Congress to stabilize the U.S. territory's grid and improve reliability has been spent in the 7 years since Hurricane Maria hit the island as a Cat 4 storm, said Robert Mujica, the board's executive director. "We need to move faster," he said at the board's public meeting. "The current situation is not acceptable." Well, they say no shit Sherlock a lot of times. A growing number of Puerto Ricans frustrated by the outages are demanding that the U.S. territory's government cancel its contract with Luma Energy, which operates the transmission and distribution of power. Several gubernatorial candidates have echoed that call, but Mujica rejected such a move. "We cannot go back to the old system," he said, as he recognized that Puerto Rico experiences too many power failures. He added that if a viable alternative is not immediately available, it would only lead to further delays. He characterized conversations about canceling the contract as premature and said officials need to prioritize projects that can be completed immediately, as he urged federal agencies to expedite approvals and waivers. 7 years. Every day that these funds are not deployed is another day that the people of Puerto Rico are at risk of being without power, Mujica said. I would add, for 7 years. Governor Pedro Pierluisi, who attended the meeting, said that more than $17 billion was not really available until mid-2021, and that his administration has been very creative in dealing with the bureaucratic hurdles of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. He said his administration has been advancing money to contractors as one way to help speed up reconstruction of the grid raised by Maria in September of 2017. Overall, Pierluisi said, the government has spent 46% of FEMA's funds on Maria-related reconstruction projects. Not everyone can afford generators or solar panels on the island of 3.2 million people, with more than 40% below the poverty rate. Roughly 120,000 rooftop solar systems have been installed so far. The push to move toward renewable energy on an island where fossil fuels generate about 94% of its electricity has drawn increased scrutiny to a net metering law. In late July, the board filed a lawsuit challenging amendments to the law which compensates solar-equipped households for their contribution to the grid. As the board met, protesters gathered outside to demand that it withdraw the lawsuit, with organizers submitting a petition with 7,000 signatures in support. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.